Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar. I'm Paige Parker. I'm one of the trainers here at eduphoria, and also on the line we have Joel Adkins.
Hey everyone.
Joel is going to be answering questions. Here, I will switch over. I forgot to click the button. That's us. So there's Paige and Joel will be answering questions. So as we go through the session, if you would put your questions in the comment or the questions box that's in your navigation bar for the webinar, you can just type your questions in there and Joel will be answering them in the background. We'll probably stop periodically and see if there are any questions that we need to discuss with the whole group. And without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and jump in with today's topic, which is basics. We're going back to basics and talking about the lesson planner. So on the agenda for today, we're going to talk about schedules and what eduphoria means or what forethought means when we talk about schedules. We're going to go over creating a new one and also editing your old one. We're going to talk about writing lesson plans and all the features that you have in the lesson planner, how eduphoria stamps the page each time you click on a date, how you can edit the template, the different views that you can use when you're writing your lesson plans, and we're going to do a little comparison about why you might want to use one for certain things and one for other things, what they have in common and how they're different. We're going to talk about adding your standards, which is your TEKS, to your lesson plans. We'll talk about checklists as an option. That's something that has to be turned on at the district level. So not all districts may have it turned on, but if you see it and you like it, you can talk to your district person and see if that's something that y'all want to take advantage of. And then we'll talk about a couple of tips and tricks at the end, just things that kind of help you manage that lesson plan. Okay, let's talk about the lesson planner schedule. When you first log into Forethought for the very first time, it's going to take you to the screen that you see there on the right that says Set Up My Planner. And I like to think of the planner as that big book that they used to give us. It was a spiral bound book that had pages inside with little squares on the page, and you could put 1 week, a day in each square for each of your preps and plan your lessons out that way. I may be the oldest one on this call, so I might be the only one who remembers that book, but I try to think of Forethought kind of like that. That's going to be my planner. I'm going to set it up with a place in there for each of my preps, and then I'm going to have a place for days of the week.
I remember that planner too, Paige.
Yay, that makes me feel better.
Paper, notebook.
Yep.
Old times. I remember
Old
that.
school, that's right.
Dixie remembers it too, she says.
Awesome. So I'm not the only one. There are probably some young ones going, I have no idea what they're talking about. Before we jump in live, I do want to mention a couple of things here. We have an article in online help, and so I'm going to click over in our online help section. If you go to Forethought, it is currently in the start of school section. It'll probably get moved into the regular teacher section at some point during the year, but we have an article out there for new teachers setting up their planner for the very first time, and then we also have one for returning teachers that we'll talk about later. And there's a video here. That video lives in YouTube, but there's a link to it here that you can watch, and it's all about the planner and all about setting it up for the first time, walks you through that process. And then you have screenshots of everything that you need to know. So everything we talk about today is going to be in here, and you always have that to refer to when you go back and start doing this in your classroom or wherever you're at home, wherever you want to be. I'd be at home in my fuzzy slippers if it was up to me. I'm not going to click on the video link because I showed you where it is there in the online help, but Joel did a great job with the video, and it's very helpful to remind yourself either, for the first time after today when you go to set up your planner, or then there's also an article about doing it again to edit when you come back for another year. So now I'm going to jump in live to Forethought, and we're going to create a schedule from scratch. So this is a brand new teacher, and I'm going to click on Forethought for the first time. And when you click on Forethought for the first time, you get that setup planner screen. So this first screen just tells you a little bit about what we're talking about, how we're using words. So schedule is really a list of your preps. It doesn't have to be all of your class periods. although you can do that. Some elementary teachers like to have placeholders for lunch and centers and recess and specials that they don't really write lesson plans for, but they just want to place in their schedule so they can see that. Um, if you have multiple preps, there's no reason for you to write the same lesson plan more than one time. So you can just have two things in there if you have two preps. So by schedule, it's not like a bell schedule. It's just a list of the things that you teach. And when we talk about adding entries or adding courses, you will put in the specific courses that you teach, and that will link them to the standards so that you have those standards in your schedule when you plan your lessons. Okay, I'm going to click on the next button, which is down in the lower right-hand corner, and we're going to start creating one. So the first thing we need to talk about is naming your schedule, and I recommend just putting your name in there. So I'm going to put this, this is Pomona Sprout from Hogwarts. So that's the name that I'm going to put in for her schedule title. I know that everybody's probably looking at it and saying, okay, now you need to put 1920 in there because that's the impulse that everything that we do in a school year, the title always says 1920 or 2021 or whatever that is. I'm going to recommend that you don't do that because what we want is one big lesson planner book with individual chapters for each year, but not a new book each year. And this schedule is like your book. So I don't want to put a year on it because I want to go back in next year and edit this one if I need to, not create a new one. I want to have just one lesson planner, one schedule for forever. So I'm not going to put a year on it. I know it's hard, but I'm not going to. Okay, I'm going to click the next button in the lower right-hand corner, and now we need to add entries to our schedule. Remember from that first screen, the entries are our courses or those headings, whatever else we need to put in there. So I'm going to click on add an entry. There is an important piece of information up here. You can only add 12 entries to your schedule with text. So if you have more than 12 preps, I feel very sorry for you. But that's another reason just to keep it to your preps and not to your actual class periods because you are limited there. Okay, I'm going to say add an entry. And I have three kinds of entries that I can add. Most of the time, you're going to leave it at that top one, which is why it's the default, a course with learning standards. And all that means is it's a course that has in Texas, TEKS. It's a state course that is approved and has TEKS. In other states, they have different names for the standards, but whatever they're called, that's what most of your courses are. So for this first one, that's what I'm going to pick, and I'm going to say next. And then it shows me the curriculum tree for my district. So in this case, I'm going to say I'm a middle school teacher. I'm going to open the middle school folder, and then I'm going to go to the subject area, and I'm going to find the course. If I was an elementary teacher, I would go to the grade level first and then the subject. So it depends on if you're elementary or secondary, but you're just going to drill down until you find the course that you want to add. I'm going to say middle school, English language arts. I'm going to click to highlight grade 6 because I have to have it highlighted. And then I'm going to click the next button down in the lower right-hand corner. And it asks me to name this entry. It asks me to enter a title, but it automatically puts the name that is associated with those standards. So it's already naming them English Language Arts and Reading, grade 6. My recommendation is to just leave that name because that's what's associated with the standards. What you definitely don't want to do is put first period as the name for this course because first period this year might be one thing and first period next year is going to be another thing, and you're going to have to click and make sure you know what you're deleting and what you're not. So it just makes it clearer if you keep that in the title. You may have occasion where you have one entry that's English Language Arts and Reading, grade 6, and then another one that you put in that you add pre-AP to the end of. The only time you would need to do that is if the lesson plans are different. So if I teach the same TEKS in regular and pre-AP, but I teach them differently, and so my lesson plans are going to be different. I would need to have 2 entries for that, one that was regular and one that I put a little suffix at the end to designate how it's different. In this case, I'm just going to leave it at regular 6th grade English and click my next button. And that brings us back to where we started at the add entries to the schedule screen. Now I have one prep in there in my schedule. I might teach this subject and this same lesson plan 3 times during the day, but I don't need to repeat it in my lesson plan book. I only need to put it in there one time. If I wanted to add another entry, I would just click on add an entry and go back through that same process. I'm actually going to click on add an entry and talk about the types for just a second. If I had another course with standards, again, I would just repeat that process, leave that highlight or selected, click next, and then pick my course out of those folders. The middle option says a course that mirrors another course. This type you most likely are only going to use if you teach at a AB block scheduled campus. So if you have A-day courses and B-day courses, then you might want to use mirrored, because what that does is if I write the lesson plan for 6th grade English on A-day, and then I also teach 6th grade English on B-day, I can set it up to mirror, and I only have to write that lesson plan once. When I put it in on A-day, it shows up in both places. If you don't teach block schedule, you don't really need to do that. But if you can't stand the thought of your schedule not reflecting every class period, you could create one section that was regular, and then you could mirror it however many times you wanted to in your planner. You'll have to do a lot of scrolling if you set it up that way, and it's not really necessary, but it can be done if you want your schedule to look that way. And then the third type is a special entry, which is used if you want to add notes for something specific, or if you want to add headings in like lunch or tutorials or recess or something like that. So I'm going to do one of those just to show you what it looks like. I'm going to click on a special entry and click next. And then I'm going to name this. And in my case, I'm going to call it tutoring. And I do want to be able to make comments. The whole point of this for me is to have a place, kind of like a row in that lesson plan book, where I can write about something that's not one of my standard courses. So maybe I have kids who come into my room before or after school, and I want a place where I can make notes about what I'm going to have them do when they come in. So I'm going to say yes to this one. If I only wanted a placeholder like for recess to show where it falls in the day, I would say no to comments, and that would give me just a heading and not an actual place to plan. So I'm going to click on the next button, and now I have 2 entries in my schedule. I can tell that one is a regular course because it has the 2 people there as the icon. And then my tutoring is not a course with TEKS. It is a special entry and just has a calendar icon. If I had a list and I wanted to rearrange them, I can move them up and down using my up and down buttons. Again, it doesn't really matter how they land in your planner. This is not a bell schedule, but if you want to see what you see first period in the morning at the top of the list, you can do that. So if tutoring happens before school, I could move it up. I always like my courses to be at the front and then my tutoring at the bottom, so I'm going to move it back down. And I could go in and edit the name if I wanted to or make changes. Once I have my schedule the way I want it to be, I'm going to click on the next button. And it's going to ask me a question. Do you want another schedule? And we talked about that at the beginning when we were naming it. And I said, you always want to have just one schedule. The only exception to the one schedule is if you're at that block campus where you have A day and B day. Then you would need a schedule for A day and a schedule for B day. Other than that, I only want to have one. And if I have that A day and B day, I still want it to be A day forever, not A day for just this school year, and B day forever, so that I can see those lesson plans and pull them forward year to year. So I'm going to say no. I do not want another schedule because I am not at a block schedule campus. I'm going to click the no button and it tells me I'm done. But then I always have to remember that in eduphoria, you're not done until you click the final button, which is always in the lower right-hand corner. So I'm going to click where it says Begin Using Forethought. And then it takes me to my lesson planner and shows me what it's going to look like. Joel, are there any questions I need to address at this point?
No, we're getting some questions. I think people might be joining the webinar later than when we started. There is an
Okay.
agenda that's been set, and what Paige is showing now is really just the start of how to create the original parts of the lesson planner, but she will be showing how to edit existing planners as well as other information that y'all are asking about in the help. Just know she
Okay.
will be getting to those things.
Okay, so if anybody joined late, this is our agenda on the screen now, and we'll be covering all of those items. We've just been through creating a schedule for the very first time, and if you came in late and missed that, you can go to our online help and find an article that includes a video that will walk you through what we just did. And then now that we have done that, we're going to talk about editing that schedule. So those of you who have joined and are uh, not brand new teachers, maybe you've used this before but you don't remember, but when you open it up you see something like this, I'm going to show you how you can go back and make some changes to that. So at any time, right now I'm looking at my schedule and I see my English language arts and reading and I see my tutoring down here at the bottom. At any time that I want to, I can go back and edit that schedule if there's something about it that I meant to do, or oops, I just got assigned another prep and now I need to add it in there. To do that, I'm going to go down to the bottom left-hand corner where it says Change My Settings. And when I click on Change My Settings, I have the option to go to My Schedules. And I'm going to do that. It shows me the schedule I have, and I'm going to click on it and say I want to add it. I would not want to add a schedule. I think I just said add instead of edit. I'm going to edit it. I would not want to add a schedule unless I was wanting to add a B day for block schedule. I just want to have one other than that. See how many times I can say that during the webinar. Um, so I'm going to click on edit schedule, and then I could edit the name if I need to. If I don't, I'm just going to click next, and it brings me back to my screen where I can add entries. So if I just got assigned another prep, they're splitting some things up, moving some classes around, I could go in and add another entry. Say it's a course with standards, so it's a regular state approved course. I'm going to go back into middle school and I'm going to grab, maybe they gave me one section of 7th grade because we have a big 7th grade class this year. So I'm adding that one in, I'm leaving the name the same. I'm going to click the next button in the lower right hand corner. And now it's in my list. I can click on that course and move it up so that tutoring is at the bottom of the page again. And then I could go back and add additional entries if I need to, or I could, maybe they just switched me all together from 6th to 7th. I could remove 6th grade if I wanted to. So you can always add courses, you can always remove courses so that your schedule is exactly what you want it to be. And then I would click on the next button. Again, it asks me if I need to change my schedule in any other way, like adding one or removing one, and I don't need to, so I'm going to click the next button. And again, it tells me I'm done and I can begin using forethought with that button in the lower right-hand corner. So for those of you just joining, there is a video and an article on both of those on starting from scratch for the very first time. Oops. There we go. So you can go to our online help and find an article that will walk you through the very beginning process. And then you can also find an article on editing your schedule. So you can go in and change your settings and go to my schedules to get to that. So if I go back to the articles, again, when you go into online help and you go to forethought, at the start of school, you're going to see that new teacher, set up your lesson planner, returning teachers, edit your planner schedule.
Hey,
So
Paige.
Yes, sir.
I was just going to say we have two really good questions. We
Okay,
have time.
absolutely.
One of the questions was block scheduling. Would you recommend how would you recommend a planner for A and B days for a teacher?
I would do 2 schedules for A and B day. So I would go in to change my schedules, and I would want to have Miss Sprout A day, and then I would want to add a schedule that says Miss Sprout B day. And I would want to plan all my A day courses in that one schedule, and I would want to plan all my B day courses in the B day schedule. Now, if I taught a course on both days and the lesson plan was going to be the same on both days, I would want to write the plan on A day and mirror the plan onto B day so that I didn't have to write it 2 times. Usually in A day and B day, your schedules are not the same. You don't teach the same thing on A and B. You might have 2 of one prep on A and only 1 of that prep on B. So I would have an A day schedule and a B day schedule. And there is actually some information in the articles. If I go into the regular forethought section and I go into, well, actually it's in the set up your planner article. If I scroll down a little bit, there is a section that talks about, here we go, when you would want to have an A day or a B day, and there's somewhere in here where it talks about block scheduling. I don't remember
I
where. Oh,
saw
there
it.
it is.
It was
There
in
it
the
is. So,
there you go.
so when it talks about scheduling strategies, what are the things that you would want to do? In this case, if I was looking at this as an example, I would want to plan my US history lesson on A day, and then I would want to set it up as a mirrored course on B day, and actually I would do it for all 3 of those. I don't know why that one didn't mirrored, but I'd want to plan it here and let it be mirrored on all 3 of those. That way I only have to write the lesson plan once, but it's going to show up in all of those places. I actually don't have to have um, 3 US histories at all on B day. I could have just 1, even though clearly I teach it 3 times. I don't need to have that lesson in there 3 times. If it's the same course, same lesson, I could just have it mirrored 1 time.
Good.
I hope that answered, and if you have additional questions, please send them to training@eduphoria.com, and we'll get back to you with those answers after the webinar.
Eduphoria.net. Can I ask one more question? We
Yes, sir.
have Connie was asking, what do you recommend for self-contained teachers? Do you recommend a planner with 4 contents underneath the course or 4 courses or entries?
Okay, when you say self-contained, if we're talking elementary self-contained, I would recommend 4 courses. So I would set it up just like this, but I would have an English, a math, a science, and a social studies. If you're talking about self-contained where you have multiple grade levels in the class at the same time, then I might talk to my campus eduphorian or my district eduphorian about creating a special course where they could combine those TEKs for you. And there's also some information about special courses in that schedule article. Or if you have additional questions, send it to training@eduphoria.net. I did it right this time. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Um, and again, most elementary teachers who are considered self-contained, they do have a block or a course, an entry for each of their 4 subject areas. That way they get all of the TEKs in each subject area. Okay, I do want to talk about the things that you see here. This is my course box. And so when I click on that course box, it's going to show me the curriculum over on the right-hand side, whatever curriculum is associated with that course by my district. What you get from Eduphoria is the folder with all of the standards for that course. But your district might build some additional folders and put some additional documents out there. That's Forethought, like all of the Eduphoria products, is completely customizable, so your district may use it one way and another district may use it differently. But when I click on the box, I think they're blue. A lot of people say they look gray, but whatever color that box is, when you click on it, you will see some tools appear in the box and you will see the curriculum appear over here on the right-hand side. And you'll also see all of your preps, whatever they are. Now, Here's one thing that I wanted to talk about. It's on our agenda to talk about stamping. When I opened my lesson planner, I only had 6th grade reading and English language arts and reading in there. And then I went back and edited my schedule and I added 7th grade. So where is 7th grade? Well, the way eduphoria forethought works is when you look at a day, when you open up that date in your lesson planner, Forethought stamps that entry with your schedule, the number of courses that you have, and also with the template that your district is using. Your template may look different than what I have here in my demo site, but it's going to stamp it with those courses and templates. Because I made the changes after this page was stamped, it has the old version. And so in order to get the new version, I need to erase that stamp and stamp it again. And that's what I'm going to do now. Um, if you look at this, all I have is my courses and my template, but I'm going to go up to the top of the screen where there's a little icon with a plus sign, and I'm going to click and say delete today's plans. I usually get a gasp. I can't hear y'all, but usually when I'm doing live training, I get a gasp when I say delete today's plans because that sounds scary to teachers. But is there really a lesson plan here? Not yet. All we have is a marker that says what course I'm teaching and my template. So if I delete it, that's all I'm losing, and it's going to restamp it with that same information plus the changes that I made. So I'm going to say delete today's plans. I'm going to say yes, I'm sure. And so I see the little flash where it took it away and it stamped it again, only this time it has both of my preps in there, and each one of my preps has a template. The only thing that doesn't get a template is my tutoring course. If it doesn't have TEKS, it doesn't have a template. So I just erased the one that was the wrong template and put the right one in there. I erased a stamp and restamped. And that you're going to see that occasionally. It might happen to you where you had accidentally clicked on a date and a week later you click on that again and you're like, oh, that's not my right schedule. It's probably because you had clicked on it. So I can always tell if it's been clicked if I look over to my calendar over in the navigation pane. If it's bold in my calendar, and I'm hoping y'all can see that it's bold, that means I visited it. When I go to the 29th, that one's not bold, so it has not been stamped with anything yet. And when I do stamp it, it's going to be with the updated template because I haven't been there until after I made those changes. Last thing I want to mention is down here at the bottom where I have my tutoring class. I do have a place to write and I can get a flashing cursor, but I don't have a template here. If I had checked off that I didn't want to be able to make comments, I would get just this blue box that says tutoring, but I wouldn't get a flashing cursor. So if I wanted to do something that said recess or specials or lunch or whatever, I could do that as just a placeholder and not have the flashing cursor, not be able to type there at all. But let's say I do want to have a template for tutoring. When my kids come in, I usually put them in groups. And so I'm going to have group 1, group, I can't type when people are looking, group 2, group 3. And I just want to have that information in there so I will remember I need to have something for those groups. Template could be as simple or as complex as you want, but if I don't want to have to do that every single day, I want that to just show up for me. I can go over here to the little wrench in the course bar for tutoring, and when I click on that little drop down arrow, I'm going to say set as default text for this entry. Now that's not going to change anything else in any of my other courses. It's only going to set this to be there, and now that's the template for my tutoring. If I click on tomorrow's date and say I want to, well, let me cancel and make sure I'm saved. All right, now I'll go to tomorrow. So when I go to the 29th, it's going to stamp it with that template, which includes the 2 courses, the 2 templates, and the new template that I just created and saved for tutoring. So you can always make additions to your template by adding something in there and setting as default text. I could do that up here if I wanted to. If in my template, this is what my district says I have to do, but I also want a place in here for homework and they didn't put a place in there, I could put it in there. I could make it a different color if I wanted to by using my color wheel. So I just highlighted it and selected a color from up here in the color wheel. And that way everybody knows, oh, she added that. That's not part of our template. But if I want it to show up every day, I'm going to click on my wrench and say set as default text for entry. Now it's saved, and from this day forward, that's how it's going to be. But if I go back to the 28th, is it going to be there? Let me hit save. Is it going to be there? That's the $10,000 question on the 28th. No. Why not? Because I made that change after I left and went to the 29th. So this one was stamped first. Then I went to the 29th, added homework. When I come back to the 28th, it doesn't have homework. So anything that's stamped before you make the change is not going to have the change. To get it back, again, quick and easy, delete today's plans. And there it is with my homework added into the template. So the big lesson here is make sure you make all the changes that you want to change to your template and your schedule before you start clicking around in the calendar over here. Because the more dates you click on and turn bold, the more things you're going to have to clean up after you make changes to your template or to your schedule. So get it right, make sure it's exactly the way you want it, and then you can start moving forward in your calendar and changing things, adding plans. Okay, let's talk about views. There are a couple of ways that you can look at your planner and view it. Up at the top, you'll see that it has the instructional date, and we are currently on the plan by day view. So we're looking at one day at a time, all of my preps for one day, and that day is today, and it's the 13th instructional day in my fictional school district. So I can go up to the top and change that view by clicking on the little drop down arrow beside this calendar that has a 1. When I click there, I have view weeks plans, plan by day, which is what we're on right now, and plan by course. So plan by day is the default. It's what it's always going to open up to, but I also have view weeks plans and plan by course. I always like to think about Sesame Street here. One of these things is not like the other. Joel, which one of these things doesn't belong? Plan by
Oh,
course.
sorry. I was talking, but I didn't
Okay.
unmute.
Okay, so which one doesn't belong?
Plan by course.
Actually, no.
Oh, really? I was
So
looking
we
at the
have,
icon.
well, it's not the icon. Plan by course, plan by day. Does it say plan by week?
Nope.
No, it does
View.
not. So this one is not a fully functional planner. And that's one of the things that people get confused about, I think. It says you can view them in the week view, but it doesn't recommend that you plan there. And I'll show you why. If I go to view weeks plans, I'm going to get a snapshot that looks the most like that little book that we've been talking about with a square for each prep for each day of the week. And everybody says, oh yeah, I like that view. I want to keep using that view. But my curriculum pane over on the right-hand side, it's not there. So I cannot add standards to my lessons. I can't put my TEKS in. I also have a very limited number of tools up here. So I can't put in images, I can't put in hyperlinks, I can't put in tables. I can't do very much with formatting at all. What this view is good for is if I see a typo, I can click in here and fix that typo. And I could also say, oops, I didn't do Thursday. That's really what this view is for. It's not designed for you to write your lesson plans here. It is not to plan by week. It is to just view that week. Now to get back to today, I'm just going to double click on today's date up here, and it'll take me back to the plan by day view, which is what we were in before. So I'm back where I need to be. And here, you see I have all these other tools up at the top that I didn't have in the week view. And I can also add in attachments to my lesson plans, which I cannot do in the week view. And I can also add in standards. Here are all my TEKS, and I cannot do that in the week view. There's one other view, and this is the one that I would use to actually plan. I would go into plan by course and when it was time for me to write my lesson plans, because what this one does is it gives you a whole week of one prep. So I'm going to put on my grade 6 ELAR hat, and I'm going to plan Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday all in one course. So there are all of my lessons for the week for grade 6. And when I'm done planning for grade 6, then I'm going to flip over to grade 7, and I'm going to write my lesson plans for that prep the whole week. But the whole time that I'm in that week's view, I can still click on the course and get my curriculum to show up, so I can get my standards and add my TEKs. I still have all my tools up at the top, and I can still add attachments. So it's fully functional whether I'm in by course or by day. So the ones that say plan by, they have everything you need. The one that says view does not have everything that you need to do your planning. Okay, I'm going to go back to 6th grade, and I'm going to start with a lesson plan. So we're going to start with Monday. I'm going to click on my course box, and maybe I have my lesson plan sitting here and I know what standards I'm covering. I'm going to go in and double click on a standard over here in the list. So I'm just going to double click on 7A and 7B, and you'll notice as I'm clicking, it's adding them over here to that course box. So I don't have to type out all the standards anymore. I just have to double click on them and they're in my lesson plan. And that's a great thing, great time saver for you. Also, your district can, if they choose to, add the ELPs into your courses. And so I could just double click and add the ELPs that go along with that lesson as well. Again, the ELPs are a district choice. What you will definitely have is the TEKs or the standards for your class. Putting the standards in here does a couple things. One is a shortcut for you, and it's a lot faster than having to type them out or write them, in each time. But also, I can go into my standards, and in a few minutes, and I'm going to refresh to see if I can make it speed up. Well, let me save it first because I'm never sure. When it tells me that, it makes me worry. It does do an auto save, so periodically you'll look up there and the save button will be gray. And oh yeah, I'm on this date. It threw me back to my view by day, and I want to go to course. So when I go back to the courses, there are the standards that I had selected, and I'll scroll back up to the top. And what is going to happen eventually, and it takes a minute for it to cycle through to the server, but the standards that I add into my lesson planner are going to get check marks over here in the list. So hopefully, as we're talking, those check marks are going to show up over there, and I'll talk a little bit more about what that does. So I can add my standards in, and then once I have done that and they show up, I can get more information about them. So that's one of the great things about Forethought. It's going to let you track how you are covering the standards and get some data about that coverage. So I'm running a refresh, trying to make it see my standards that are covered. And that may have been a mistake because it's taken a while. But I'm hoping when it's done with this refresh that it will have a check mark on those standards. Oh, that's not a happy sound. Let's see. Let's go back. See if you can go back to a happier place. Okay, I'm not even going to try that again. So here we are back in my planner, looking at 6th grade. Still don't have check marks yet, but hopefully they will show up. So I'm going to talk about checklists for a minute, and then I'll come back to the standards, and hopefully that'll be back in there. When you are looking at the gray box below your standards, there's a thing that says click here to select checklist items. This is something that's not always turned on at the district level. Again, customizable. But if your district has them, you'll see that there, and then you'll see some checklists. So this is something that makes it faster and easier to do the lessons. Instead of having to write it all out, I'll just say, today I'm doing a little bit of lecture, and then they're going to do some individual exploring, and my assessment is going to be a ticket out the door. For my instructional strategies, we're going to do taking some 2-column notes, and then they're going to be using their laptops, and I'm going to be using Microsoft Office products as I'm doing my lecture. So I would just go through and check off the things that apply and close that window. And when I close it, it collapses except for the items that I checked. So I just added all of that information into my lesson plan just by clicking on the boxes in my checklist. And so that gives you a lot of information for your planner without having to spend a lot of time writing it all out. If your district does not have that set up, you don't have any checklists, you might want to talk to somebody at your district level and make sure they're aware of them and see if that's something they wanted to add to your system. So I can put those into my lesson plan, but I can also kind of track how I'm doing. So I can go up to the top, and there's a little printer at the top of the screen, and I'm going to say I want to print the checklist report. And it's going to give me a PDF document that shows me all of the checklists that I have for my district. And are y'all seeing that pop up of the report?
Yes, it
Okay,
is
good.
showing as a PDF.
Thank you. Okay, so it's going to show me a number for each month, and this is just for one teacher, just for me. So I can see the date range, and I can see it's me, and I can see how many times I have used a particular item during that month. I know, for example, that I fall into the rut of some whole group and either individual or pair partner. I don't do flipped classroom all that much. So, and I don't do groups as much as I do pairs. So that's something that I could see if I'm falling in that same rut. What I should see for each one of these is like a shotgun effect, a smattering of everything so that I'm hitting everybody's learning styles. But I know also that the exit ticket is my most commonly used assessment strategy. KWL charts are my most commonly used instructional strategy. So I can see, I know what my ruts are, but sometimes I need to be reminded, and I can go in and look at that report and see how I'm doing on varying things, mixing it up the way that I should be. Your administrators can also go in and see the report for your campus and see how your group is doing with instructional strategies or whatever they're monitoring. So that's going to give them some data as well. Okay, so I still don't, oh yeah, woohoo, my check marks are there. So hopefully you can see that on those standards that I used, I have a green check mark there telling me that they have been used. And that will be there from now on when I go to other days in my schedule. So when I click on that check mark, I know it's been used, but I need to know a little bit more. I can select it and then go down to the bottom, and there are 3 tabs in this bottom box. When I click on the one that looks like an old-timey scroll, that's my history tab. I'm going to click on that, and it's going to tell me the dates that I covered this standard. Since we just created this planner and this is my first day to write a lesson plan, I only have one date in there. But if it was February, I would expect to see multiple dates in there. So I can know when I look at that standard, did I cover it multiple times? Have I only covered it twice? Is that one of our focus standards and I really need to be hitting it hard but haven't? So I can see how many times I've covered it by looking at those dates. And then if I had 3 dates in there, I might want to ask myself, have I covered it deeply enough? So I could click and say, okay, let me look at Monday, and I would use my calendar to go back to Monday, August 26th. Oh, that was my introductory lesson. And then I might go to a lesson where I covered the standard in October and see, well, I went a little deeper there. That was more explaining, and they did some exploration, and we covered it a little bit more, and they even had a quiz on it. And then I covered it again in February, and I could go look at that lesson and see that was extension, elaboration. They were practicing their mastery of that skill. So I've covered it deeply, I've covered it frequently, I'm good to go. So I can come up here and see, yes, I've covered it. I can come down here and see when I've covered it. And then using those dates, I can come over to my calendar and see how I've covered it. So that's going to give me a lot of information about my standards coverage. Sometimes I don't want to have to click around and look at each one of these to see the dates and everything. So you can go up, and it's not showing very well on my screen right now, and I don't know why I can't get it to pull down. But right here is a little printer, and we had one over here that we used for the checklist report, but there's also one up at the top of the curriculum pane. And when I click on that printer, it doesn't give me any options. There's no drop down. It's just going to pull out a report for me, and it's going to show me these are the documents that I have. So they're obviously going to say not taught. But when I come down to the actual standards, beside each standard, it's going to show me all of the dates where I covered that standard. So if I'd covered it 3 times, I would see 3 different dates here. And I can scroll through all the standards for that course and see which ones have I taught, which ones have I not covered yet. So you'll get all of that information when you pull that report. Here are the ones that I had checked off, so you can see they have Monday's date on them. And if I had taught them more than once, you would see multiple dates in that list. So that's another way that you can view your own coverage of all of the standards in your course all in one place, instead of having to click on each one in order to see it. Okay, any questions about the standards or the checklists?
Not really any questions, been going through it, but I was just going to say with the checklist, something that I used to use it for was if your district did a bond, like I was over technology for my district. So one of the things that we could do is a checklist for specific items that were
Yep.
purchased with bond money that we wanted to track usage within the lesson planner. So that was a great one. And then also think of the types of professional development you might do over the summer where your teachers are focused on learning particular things. So I saw a district that was using a book study where they were focusing on specific instructional strategies, not just listing a bunch of instructional strategies, but literally going, we want to focus on these specific instructional strategies, and how would we do that?
That's a very good point. And my student and teacher technology checklists actually came from the same thing. These are things that were purchased by the district, and the board wanted to know how often they were being used. And so we put them in a checklist, and we could get a report. Because just like you can get that checklist report on yourself, your administrator can get a checklist report on their whole campus, and the district level people can get a checklist report for the entire district. So they can say, okay, we spent this money and this is how it's being used, or we had this professional development and this is how it's being used. And I did want to point one thing out about my particular instructional strategies one. As Joel said, these are sort of categories that you can check off, and these categories came from Lead Forward. But within that category, there might be 7 smaller activity examples that would fall under graphic organizer, or that would fall under foldables. So you can have I just have the big categories in mind, but you could have the smaller ones if that's something that was an initiative for your campus. I worked with a district yesterday that had about 50 items in their instructional strategies checklist, because they have that many strategies that they're trying to keep track of how they're being used and if they're being used in their district. So for actually writing the lesson plan, you're just going to click down here and you're going to type in the guiding question. I want to type the guiding light. So you're just going to type it in there, whatever it is. I can format that, so I can highlight it and make it bold. I've got tools up here to add images. I've got tools to add hyperlinks. So I can put whatever type of information I want to put here in my lesson. And again, the template is going to vary based on your district, because that's customizable as well. And then I can add attachments. And to me, that's an important part of the lesson. When I was in the classroom, I usually had about 5 flash drives on my keychain at all times, carrying around all those PowerPoint presentations, because I never knew where stuff was and I was always looking for things. But now I could just attach it to the lesson plan, and when I reuse that lesson plan later on, it's going to be there attached to it, ready to go. Okay, I do have a few what I call tips and tricks. That's what it said in the agenda. They're really just kind of recommendations or things that you might not know about that I want to talk about just a little bit. The first one is the copy wizard. So I'm going to go to the View Weeks Plans because that's where we find it. And when I go to View Weeks Plans, there's a button up here that says Copy Wizard. And it sounds like fun. So I'm going to click on Copy Wizard and I have some options. I can copy content in my planner, copy instructional days from year to year, or shift lesson plans a day. I'm going to start with the first one and I'm going to say, click on Next, and I want to copy a day. Maybe you can copy a day or a week, but I'm just going to do a day for this example. And I'm going to click on Next. And then I get to pick which date do I want to copy. So I'm going to pick Monday because I think that's where we had some standards in. Oh no, they were on Wednesday. Okay, so I put some standards in on Wednesday, so I'm going to copy that date and I will click Next. And then it says, where do you want to put it? Well, I'm going to put it somewhere in September. I changed my mind and I'm going to teach it on September 9th. And then I'll click Next. And it asks me, or it tells me, I'm going to copy everything that's on August 28th, and I'm going to put it on September 9th. Do you want to include special entries? And that would be my tutoring session. I can say yes, or I can say no. And then I'm going to click Finish. And I'm going to go back to, well, I'm going to open up Monday, because that's where I said I was going to put it. And I will have whatever I copied. Well, I copied the wrong day, but I'll have whatever I copied will show up on the date that I copied to. So you can move content around in your planner that way. Another way that you can use the copy wizard, I'll go back to it and say, I want to do copy instructional days from year to year. And this one asks you about instructional days. So remember, we have a calendar, but we also have an instructional day. September 9th is day 21. September 10th is day 22. So those are the instructional days that it's talking about here. So I'm going to go in and say Next. I want to copy last year to this year. And I'm going to go get the first 5 days of school, because usually my first week of school is similar. I have some diagnostics, some getting to know you, some writing samples. So I'm going to say I want instructional days 1 through 5. Maybe I want 1 through 7. I'm going to take instructional days 1 through 7, and I'm going to copy them from last year to this year. So it doesn't matter if last year we started on Thursday and this year we're starting on Monday. That doesn't matter, because whatever the first day of school was is going to be called instructional day 1. If it lapped over a weekend, it won't matter, because if it's instructional day 7, doesn't matter about holidays, doesn't matter about weekends. So if you had a multi-day unit that you wanted to copy, this is the way to do it. Go in and use those instructional days rather than copying a day or a week. Because if you do a week, it's going to do a Monday through Friday week. That's the only kind of week it knows. But copying instructional days, you can set the specific ones that you want. And then the last option you have in Copy Wizard is shift lesson plans a day. And that's really for those emergencies where we didn't have school because we had a hurricane. And I had my plans written for the whole 6 weeks. I just want to move everything over however many days I need to and not change any. I don't want to have to rewrite anything or whatever. So I can just shift them over, and that'll just move everything from Monday to Tuesday, everything from Tuesday to Wednesday, on down the line, as long as you have plans in your planner. So if I had the whole 6 weeks done, it would just shift the whole 6 weeks over one day. And so that one's handy as well. So that's the best way for you to copy items that you have. Another thing that I consider to be just a handy helpful thing for you to remember is that while you have your lesson plans here, and they will always be here, and I can always go back, I can go back a whole year with the 2 arrows, or month at a time with the single arrows. I can go back and look at last year's plans, or next year I'll be able to go back and look at last year's plans. I can move back and forth and see it all that way. So you're not going to lose your plans. But what if you left the district and you went somewhere else? You might want to have those plans with you. I know I would. So what I like to do is at the end of each week, I want to go up to the little printer at the top, and I want to print the week to Word. Now you can print them to a PDF document, which is actually the prettier print. When you actually print it out, it keeps the formatting better. If I was going to have a sub, I would print to PDF. But for my own personal self, every week when I'm finished with my plans, I want to print to Word and I want to put that in my Google Drive or somewhere where I can access it. The reason I say Word is because it's editable. And if I leave the district and I want to take my plans with me, I will have them in an editable version that I could reuse later and I won't lose all of the things that I put into eduphoria. Okay, that is our time for today. I want to check in and see if there are any additional questions. Joel?
There are not any floating right now that I haven't
Okay.
answered, I don't think, but
Okay.
I think it's just because you have impressively shown so much
Aw,
and people don't
shucks.
have questions.
So I do want to plug shamelessly that keep looking because we will do additional webinars later on. There's a lot more to
I think
forethought
you
than
have a
what we've seen
slide
today.
too.
I do have a slide as well.
Yeah, but it's not about forethought.
Wait, there we go. No, this one is not. But when you go in later on, you will see some additional webinars, and we will be talking about some of the other features in Forethought in those upcoming webinars.
And I just want to say this, and we're starting to get the questions again that are popping in. When we do these webinars and you register for a webinar, you will receive an email before the webinar with the link to join the webinar. And then after the webinar, you will receive a link to view the recorded webinar. So you don't have to keep asking us, will this be recorded? Yes, it's going to be recorded. Yes, you're going to receive the link to the recorded webinar so you can view it again or you can share it with other people. I think they just have to enter their name and email and then they can view it. It'll also be on our website. But yes, so whenever you register for any of the webinars, any of them, even if you don't attend them, you will still receive a link to it after it's done.
All right, thank you. And do you want to talk about our upcoming opportunities?
Sure. So we sent an email out to everyone on our mailing list, and we have this training roadshow that's coming up. And the roadshow is Paige, myself, Jason, Jenny. You can see there's a little picture of us on the right side of the screen. We are going to various cities across Texas to offer more of an in-depth training in these specific cities. And if you go to the website, it's www.eduphoria.net/training roadshow. It has each of the cities, the dates, and a link to where you can register. You can register with a credit card. We're offering 2 sessions per, well, I should say we're offering 2 courses per day, but it's 3 different offerings of those courses. So on the morning session, you'll have a strive choice, a forethought choice, an aware choice, and the same for the afternoon. And each of these sessions will run about 3.5 hours long. So it's in depth, it's with our training team, it's answering your questions, showing you how to use the software more in depth than like a 1-hour webinar can provide. So we hope that you are signing up for those and getting your seats. The upcoming webinars next week, or September 4th, we're doing all about goals, goal setting. And then there's one for Aware coming up. It looks like September 11th. You good, Paige?
Yes.
As always, I know it's weird when you're clicking and I'm not.
I'm sorry, I was answering a question, so I wasn't paying
Yeah,
attention.
if there's
Sorry.
questions that we didn't answer, I mean, Forethought has so much, and really Paige was focusing on just the basics of the one planner for a teacher. She did not get into the team planners or the shared planners and all that stuff. But if you need additional help, please contact us. We are at training@eduphoria.net, or you can contact support@eduphoria.net if you have questions about things not working correctly. But either way, we can help you.
All right. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon. And we look forward to seeing you in other webinars in the future.
Thanks, everyone. We'll send you the link. Expect
That's
the
right.
link in your
Everybody will
email
get
in a
the
couple
link in.
hours.
That's right. And we post them all online too, so you can always go back and look at older ones. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.